I've got Stewart Carroll here with me. He is the president of Beck Technology. So we are super excited to just dive into this with you guys. I just want to emphasize, please, if you have any questions, ask them during the webinar. We are going to have some time at the end to touch on those, and even if we don't, we will definitely email you and get those questions answered as well. So please ask questions. With that being said, Stewart, I will hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm going to share some thoughts around maybe some of the risks that we all know about construction. I'm going to talk about maybe some of the risks that we don't think about are being introduced in the ways that we manage risk. And then I'm going to finish with some thoughts around what we think are some potential solutions to managing risks, particularly in pre-construction. So, you know, you guys know as well as I do, you talk to different people in the construction industry. I think we all agree that we are in a very risky industry, and also in an industry that assumes a lot of risk and really doesn't get paid an awful lot of money in exchange for those risks. It's interesting though, you talk to different people in pre-con, people in the field. When you talk about risk, different people usually think about different things within risk. And we're going to talk a little bit about those in just a few minutes. But McKinsey came out with a study earlier this year, as they always do. And you know, obviously those that can manage risk have the opportunity to benefit. You can sort of look at this McKinsey quote either in a negative light or as an opportunity. And I very much am of the belief that we're in an industry that is crucial to you know, the society that we live in. It has historically underperformed in terms of productivity. And as I said just a few minutes ago, you guys have historically not got paid a lot of money. It's funny to me when I hear 5% profit. I talk to a lot of my customers, and I think they would be more than happy with 5%. I think as an industry, we actually get substantially less than that in terms of net profits. But I look at this as those that can manage risk have a huge opportunity to prosper as a result of the value that they bring. So normally when we think about risk in construction, there's really four, despite this graph showing three. We normally think of, you know, time, cost, and quality. Number of people out there probably think about, or, you know, at most you can have two of these three. It's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get the three. A friend of mine always likened this to, you know, owners. They want their project delivered in FedEx speed at Walmart prices, and they expect the highest Armani quality. So there is always this constant pressure of managing the risks of time, cost, and quality. The fourth one, which is to me is the most important, is obviously it is an industry in which we have human risk. So ensuring that we deliver on these you know, time, cost, and quality, but done in a 100% safe manner, are really the four risks that as an industry we're trying to manage. So when you think about cost specifically, you know, there's a number of things. In business, it's a pretty simple formula. Revenue minus cost is profit. When we think about construction, there's really three things that we as contractors can manage. One is the cost of work, the cost of you know, building the construction project. The second is our general conditions, the cost of our people and our equipment to deliver on the project, and then the last is our fee. And if you really think about, most of us go to it's coming up with the best price for the project, but we compete on all three of those, and more often than not, direct cost, our general conditions, and our fees. So it's really important not just to get as tight a cost for the project, but it's important as a business to make sure that our overhead costs, don't bloat our general conditions or don't require us to have a higher fee. When we assume cost risk, we also put our reputations at stake. So if we put out an estimate or build a project that is significantly over budget, we run the risk of harming our reputation, which means that the next go round, we probably won't get the project from the owner, even if we do have the lowest possible price. We also run the risk around employee retention. So everybody in construction likes to be on a winning side. Everybody's bonuses are typically linked to the success of a project. If all of a sudden we underperform and we don't make any money, people's bonuses are at risk, and lo and behold, employees tend to jump ship. So quality risk, more often than not, people think of quality as, well, that's the design, the engineer's responsibility. However, within construction, we both inherit and take on risk, sometimes knowingly and sometimes unknowingly. I found these little notes on drawing sets pretty interesting, that we inherit risk. The architect is pretty commonly putting language on the drawings or in the contracts to move risk onto us. I laughed at some of these quotes or some of these highlighted sections. How on earth do you do a takeoff if you can't trust the drawings? The bottom one, you're taking all responsibility for everything in the drawing. So at the end of the day, we are taking risk, and that can lead to legal issues. It can lead to reputation issues. So we take on quality risk. Time is another one. Not all buildings have contractual penalties for being late, but it's definitely pretty common with data centers, biotech, sports facilities, where there are actually contractual penalties if we don't deliver on time. And then obviously, if we're running long on a project, we have the opportunity cost associated. We could have taken those people and put them on other projects and won additional projects. The one that I think everybody would agree on is safety. We're in an industry where we ultimately have people's lives in our hands, and at the end of the day, nobody wants to have a death on that project. So these four risks really form the basis of what, as an industry, we are trying to manage. So risk managers use this particular graph, the risk event graph, as a way of describing how we can manage risk. So on the bottom, we have time, and on the y-axis, on the left-hand side, we have risk, and on the right-hand side, we have cost. And what this is really saying is that the likelihood that risk is introduced is highest earlier in the life of a project. If we make a mistake and we don't catch it, it's likely going to result in an issue in the field. And when we catch it late in the life of the project, it has a higher cost of fixing. So as an industry, we have obviously used pre-construction as a way of managing that risk. We start projects with next to no information. It still blows my mind that a lot of companies don't capture data. So we almost look at every single project as if it's a brand new blank sheet of paper, and we've never built a building of a similar type before. We try to manage risk throughout the design phases, concept, schematic, design, development, construction documents, but we end up focusing on deliverables, and we don't have enough time, more often than not, to get the deliverable out of the door. We tend to end up with cliffs between the different phases. So what I mean by that is, we may have done some takeoff at the end of the schematic phase. We get the DD set of drawings. Instead of modifying the things that have changed, we typically do a complete takeoff again, and we run out of time. And as an industry, we spend an awful lot of time on low value activities, activities, don't get me wrong, that are vitally important to getting the estimate and the deliverables in the hands of the design team and the owner, but they don't inherently make the buildings any better. So for example, counting, measuring, formatting reports, I would characterize as vitally important, but not necessarily making the overall building better. We're not putting additional classrooms in a building or a school. We're not putting additional beds in a hospital. We're really focused on deliverables. And as an industry, we have been deliverable centric. To make matters worse, if you look at the tools that we use, they typically, we don't have a single tool. We may have anything from 4 to 10 tools that we use in the pre-construction phase. It's interesting when you start counting them out on your hands. You know, there's a tool for a conceptual estimate. There's a tool for doing 2D takeoff. There's a tool for doing 3D takeoff. There's cost history. There's bid leveling. There's estimating. There's bid solicitation. All of these different tools out there, they all function differently. They work differently, but most importantly, they don't really interoperate. So the data doesn't flow naturally from one tool to another. And we're forced as users to copy and paste between takeoff and the estimate as an example. And every time we manually move data, we introduce risk. We introduce risk that we pasted it in the wrong cell, or we've used the wrong quantity for the wrong item. So we're not really helping ourselves with trying to reduce those 4 risks that I mentioned earlier. So when you think about pre-construction, the goal is to minimize those 4 risk factors. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work today. We spend an awful lot of time duplicating information, copying and pasting information, manually transferring information. We spend an awful lot of time counting, measuring, recounting, remeasuring as the design develops, and we create multiple iterations of the estimate. A lot of the people that I speak to today don't have a centralized way of finding information or even storing information. If they store it, it's an after the fact exercise. And as you guys know, you don't have enough time to do what you're being asked to do today, let alone reformat some data and put it into a cost history solution. I was talking to a customer of ours who was telling me that when they were using Excel, they have 13 offices across the country, and every office had a different Excel file, and every building type leader had a different spreadsheet. So you end up doing the math, and you end up with about 36 or so different spreadsheets. So where that becomes a problem is when we try and use an estimator that's familiar with one spreadsheet in another office, because that office has more work than they know what to do with. So as such, we end up doing things that introduce risk in pre-construction. So it's our belief that pre-con as we know it today really needs to change. And the way that we believe that change can occur is to look at integrated pre-construction solutions. Let's minimize the number of tools that we use. Let's reduce the amount of manual data entry that needs to happen throughout the design phase. Let's automate the handoff from GMP to the field. Let's not copy and paste and reformat data. Let's spend less time on low value activities and more time on high value activities, more analysis, more conversations on how to make this project better. So there are a number of integrated platforms out there, and we firmly believe that the industry is shifting towards integrated pre-con. The second part that we feel is happening and is vitally important to capture some of the value that McKinsey mentioned in that report that I quoted at the beginning of this presentation. And that is, as an industry, we need to start to do a better job at capturing data. So there's an awful lot of companies focusing on data in construction, which is really, really important. We have a slightly different opinion, and that is that data from the very beginning of a project all the way through completion of the project is really the important part. So instead of starting from a blank sheet of paper, let's have the ability to be able to benchmark at whatever phase we're at. Let's be able to look at when we're working for a particular owner, what happens to contingency, what happens to fees, how have we staffed projects in the past. In order to do that, we need to capture all of the data from the very beginning and at every major milestone. So instead of it being just capturing the deliverables, we need to capture everything that went into those deliverables. And by doing that, we feel that as an industry, we can make better, more informed pre-construction decisions that reduce the risks of cost, time, quality, and ultimately deliver a safer project to the field that ultimately meets all of our customers' needs and makes everybody in the industry more profitable for delivering a higher quality product in a safer manner. So with that is my presentation this morning. If there are questions, Melissa, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Sure. Thank you, Stewart. That was awesome. That was some really good, just in-depth look at, what risk really means in pre-con, what we're talking about with that. So I guess maybe something that I'd be curious about, something that I'm kind of seeing from the audience, what are some of the ways that you've seen general contractors handling some of these pre-construction risks in a really innovative fashion?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. If you sort of go back to my slide around some of the challenges, I think that's the first one. I'm not sure if it's innovative, but it doesn't happen. I think is getting everybody on the same page in terms of company standards. If we can start to produce estimates, not necessarily with the same line item descriptions, they're going to vary from project to project, but with the same coding structure, coded for master format, coded for uniformat, coded for bid package, and start capturing the data. That's something we can do even without technology. So if we're old school, we use an Excel. As long as we're capturing the data, we can then start to benchmark and run some kind of analysis. Where were we on the last 3 projects of a similar type that we've done? The other thing that I think, I would encourage, and obviously I have a little bias towards this, is I think reducing the number of tools that we use. It feels like we always want the best tool for doing a specific task, and we don't take a step back and look at what are the best tools for doing the entire thing. And for me, I think there's an awful lot of time that we measure, number of button clicks and time taken for doing takeoff, but we don't look at the time taken for getting the result of that into the estimating tool in a way that minimizes the risk of error. So I would encourage people, I'm not sure if it's innovative, but maybe take a step back and look at minimizing the number of tools, start capturing data in a standardized way. I think by doing that, you'll become more efficient, and I think over time, you'll provide your customers with a better product and control the story a lot better as to why the numbers are the way the numbers are.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. It is such a simple fix in a sense, but I think at the same time, sometimes those simple solutions, they can be the most innovative. It doesn't always have to be, a super mind-blowing or futuristic answer. So I love that. Thank you, Stewart. And I think we just have one more question here. So, you kind of touched on it a little bit with the slide discussing the pre-construction data lifecycle, but as we move into the future, as pre-construction continues to evolve and adapt, how do you see these risks evolving themselves? How do you see them changing?
Well, I think the first thing is I'd like to think that the 4 risks are going to be there. And I think as an industry, pre-construction is the way that you manage them. I think we all acknowledge that those 4 risks are there. However, I think sometimes we don't think about the additional risks that we introduce in pre-construction. So I think with integrated pre-con, with capturing data through the pre-construction data lifecycle, we can start to minimize the risks introduced inside the pre-construction process. I'd like to think that if we are spending less time counting, measuring, formatting reports, and more time on proactively trying to find ways to either build the building more effectively or efficiently in a proactive way, or spending more times with the subs to understand how they build it right the first time and don't have to continually come back to the project to fix things. I think pre-construction has the opportunity of minimizing those risks of cost, time, quality. And then I'd like to think that as a result of all of that, you know, as contractors will become more profitable. We'll be able to do more with less people, or maybe the same with less people and more with more people. And as a result, I think we'll deliver a better product. So to me, minimize the risks in pre-con, be more efficient, be more effective, and ultimately deliver a better product to your customers. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Stewart. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. To everyone who's online, I really encourage you. We are going to have another webinar coming up September the 16th. It's just going to be a high-level look at what we're doing with Estimator right now, ways that it can add value to your team. So if you know anyone that might be interested in that, definitely forward that to them. We're going to be sending invites to you guys shortly. Additionally, if you registered for this webinar, you're going to get a recording whether or not you attended. So just be on the lookout for that. I just want to say thank you again to everyone who joined us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, guys.